Now, before all else, I would just like to say that this guide is based off my knowledge accumulated in deck building and collectible card games throughout the years. I am in no way claiming that I'm a pro yet. Hey guys, Sixenm here, and I've been thinking lately, and then I've been searching around all the forums, all the Reddits, and there hasn't been a comprehensive competitive deck building guide for newer or more intermediate or advanced players to take their ideas and turn them from maybe a basic synergy or something small that you like, or just a specific card that you want to introduce into the competitive scene and turn it into a competitive deck. Now, this card's going to be broken down into multiple sections that it takes to build a competitive deck, no matter what time in the metagame you're at, whether it be 5 days into the meta like we are now, or when this video came out, so I don't know when you're actually watching this video, or 1 or 2 months into the meta and you're looking to design an anti-meta deck to bring to a tourney, or to climb a specific place on the ladder where it's filled with some of the more popular decks that have varying weaknesses. Now, first off, before anything else happens, we need to know the breakdown of what makes a competitive deck, or just competitive decks in general. Now, competitive decks always follow a cohesive strategy. Now, this is just how do you aim to win the game. This can be one threat, one card that dictates how your deck is built. For example, right now that would be Cthulhu Druid, or any Cthulhu based deck, right? Or you could have multiple angles of attack. Say one of the more popular decks right now would be the Flood Zoo deck that's dominating the ladder, right? Secondly, the deck has a plan every single turn of the game. What I mean by this is, for specific decks, say I'll give you an example. So control decks, turn 1 through maybe 6 or 7 or 8, they play reactive. They want to keep the board clear. They want to stall until their more powerful cards can go over the top of the opponent. Priest, they'll have multiple clears. Maybe the Healadin deck will deal with the board with Pyromancer equality, heal until they can drop all their bombs, all their death rattles, all that sort of stuff. And for Druid, a ramp deck, maybe turns 1 through 4, you want to drop Wild Growth or Maya Keeper, and further your plan, accelerate your minions out, which are average statted, but when they're played 1 turn early, it makes a huge world of difference. So why this is important is you can't have a deck that's missing a plane of attack at some point in the mana curve, right? Say you're on turn 5 with an aggro deck, and you should be at the part where you're forcing through damage, you're trying to close out the game, and your curve stops between 4 and 7, and that's just detrimental to your own game plan, because without filling out that part, no matter what, the deck isn't going to operate the way you want it to in terms of what kind of deck it is. So make sure competitive decks always have a plan at all stages of the game. Third part is every competitive deck has its good and its bad matchups. Now in Hearthstone, because there's so much RNG in the game, no matchup is really 100% winnable or losable, except maybe when it comes to Freeze Mage versus any form of armor up or tank up. That being said, you need to know the meta, which will be talked about later. And you just need to know what cards in each deck are good against, what cards you're planning to build, or just what are the good and what are the bad cards in your deck and in the matchups. And finally, this doesn't apply to all competitive decks, obviously, but having a backup plan takes away from the coherent synergy overall, but it also wins games when your initial plan falls through. Now, that can just be really powerful legendary minions. Like, your plan was dropping a bunch of really powerful legendary minions, like 10 drops and whatnot. But when your plan doesn't have a backup and they deal with the initial threat, say Cthulhu, right? Or Cthulhu Druid, right? Because when they deal with Cthulhu and maybe the Twin Emperors, you're left with nothing in your deck that can match up to a late game of another deck. Well, the only difference for this is, some decks can't afford to run that backup plan because it takes too much away from the original synergies. So, again, this is not a part of every competitive deck, but a deck with a backup plan has a higher chance of winning when the game gets in the later turns and your original plan looks less and less enticing. Alright, so now on to the actual competitive deck building. Okay, now moving on to forming the deck idea. Right, so deck ideas can come from any little thing, any interaction you see when you're playing Arena, or maybe when you're watching a stream and something comes out of some RNG happens, and you see something that you think can be busted, right? So all decks, every single deck is trying to do something that they believe is can be abused, right? So for example, this is just like Patron Warrior. They're abusing the fact that they have so many, like Warriors abusing the fact that they have whirlwinds that trigger patrons multiple times in a turn. Originally Patron was written off as a bad card, but you see, how else? Another example would be Secret Paladin with Dr. 6 coming down on turn 6, drawing 5 cards. But yeah, so an idea can come from anything, from anywhere, but if you want to make a deck based around your one idea, that idea has to be busted in some form or some way. Now, after you do come up with that idea and you do believe that it is busted, you have to check the metagame. Now, this is important if you want to make any competitive deck in any game, any card game, right? Metagame is important because that's who you're going to be, or those are the decks that you're going to be facing, basically, right? So to do this, you look at your little card combos and you see, will it be good against this matchup? Will it be good against this matchup? Like, how much of the metagame is taken up by an aggro deck, and you have a sweet 10 mana interaction in a class that can't reliably reach that stage of the game too well, but maybe in a slower meta it would be. So in that case, the deck would probably not be viable. But again, anything that can be abused has such a large proportion of no one can really tell before it actually happens. But yes, make sure you check with the metagame. Is your interaction, or is your idea, does it fit in the metagame? Like, does it have a place? Right? Does it destroy 50% of the metagame and maybe have like a 25% 50-50 matchup? That's good enough to be a competitive deck. Okay, moving on. when after you form your idea, after you look at the metagame, you have to put your deck in a category, right? And you have to follow this when like into the next part, which I'll explain later. But the categories are: you have aggro decks. Everyone knows aggro decks. You have mid-range decks. Those are the decks that can contribute to the game at all points, looking to outvalue your opponent, right? And then you have control decks, which kick into gear later in the game, and they try and spend the first few turns of the game, being really reactive. But there's also combo, and that can be good old Force of Nature Savage Roar pre-nerf or Miracle Rogue. Most combos have been nerfed now, except for Freeze Mage. Well, Freeze Mage was nerfed years ago, but yes. So your deck has to fall into one of those 4 categories. Now this just ensures that your deck just follows a path, and that you're not going astray. You see a card and you think, wow, this is a sweet card, I could fit this in somewhere, but it doesn't meld with the category of deck you're in. Like, you can't throw a random, say, Nefarian because he's a sweet dragon into a random aggro deck, right? So that is the basis of forming an idea that can be competitive. Now, moving on to the next step. So, building the skeleton of the deck is the next part. Now, you may ask, what is the skeleton of a deck? Now, this can, the definition can vary when it comes to different card games, but the skeleton of a deck usually is, your 15 to 20 to 25 unchangeable cards that follow the strategy or the card, that revolve around the cards or the card that you choose to try and abuse. For example, this would be like all the Cthulhu cards. You can't have a Cthulhu deck if you don't have Cthulhu cards, and that would be part of the skeleton, right? So let's example the skeleton of a Druid Cthulhu deck. I'm using Druid Cthulhu a lot. I don't know why, but I guess it's just the easiest to explain. So the skeleton has to involve ramp. It has to involve ways to deal with minions. It has to involve Cthulhu cards, and it has to involve ways to getting to Cthulhu, and also the cards that abuse the Cthulhu synergy, right? So that's what a skeleton is. Now, you flesh out your skeleton by going through all cards available, in standard or in wild that you're having this idea, and you may draft up 40, 50 cards that you think are amazing. You slim that down to the cards that you have to have in that deck, right? No aggro deck can go without early minions. That's for an example. The early minions is part of the skeleton. Now you pick and choose. Like, Zoo will always play Dark Peddler. They will always play, Imp Gang Boss. Those sort of cards are what makes up a skeleton. Now, why is this important in building a deck? Is it gives you something to always revert back to, So you build a skeleton, 15 cards, 20 cards, and you set it like that. You save that. Now you can fill out the deck with the rest of the deck with whatever you want, right? And that may or may not go very well in your testing or in your gameplay, but you can always delete that and go back to what like the deck has to do, and then try again. Then you fill it out again. This is a crucial part of deck building, right? The skeleton has to be like it is the deck in spirit, right? Because when you fill out a deck with you have 4 more slots and you can afford to tech against other decks, but the skeleton never changes. And of course, like, building a good skeleton is a crucial part of deck building. Now, to build a good skeleton, again, just refine your plan. That's all you need to do. Refine your plan down to a set number of cards that you believe can't be cut. Now you can look at other deck lists, you can look at, everything else. Everything is a resource for you. But when building a deck, make sure you have a solid skeleton to the deck. On to the next part. Okay, the penultimate step. It is metagame assessment and filling out the deck. Now, it is important after you have your solid skeleton that you need to look at the metagame and you need to know what your deck is missing to compete in this metagame. Now, okay, right now, it's full of aggro shaman. There's Zoo, those are the two main aggro decks, plus my bubble paladin deck that's up and coming. Your proud father. The mid-range decks, vary in terms of most Cthulhu decks, and then you have the dragon control priest and control warriors and Yogg mages and okay. So anyways, you have to look at the metagame and you have to look what cards you need to compete in the metagame. Right? An example from the old metagame before Whispers of the Old Gods was released. You needed Big Game Hunter, no matter what, right? Because Doctor Boom was in literally every deck, and that's just that's a really good example of what you needed, right? What every deck really needed. Now, some decks can skip this if they're going all in on their combo or their synergy. Again, like Freeze Mage, they just freeze everything and they just go face. But apart from that, you need to know the threats in the metagame. You need to know, you need to have your silver bullets for these big targets. Yeah. So, you look at your deck, the deck list. You look at all the Hearthstone stats you can. Watch some streams, read some articles. Alright, no deck can be built if you lock yourself up, in a room and just flash out an idea by yourself without thinking of the metagame. A deck is only as competitive, can only be competitive if it works above 50% of the time, on average, in the current metagame. Now, you're up to the part where you have to fill out the deck. Now, sometimes you don't need all those slots to tech in the metagame, right? But you see that you're missing parts on your curve. Sometimes it's better to fill out those parts on your curve, or sometimes it's better just to, follow your game plan and just, Not all decks worry about curve. The curve is important to aggro and mid-range decks, more so than it is for control and combo. Again, control and combo, they just want to deal with anything, or they just want to get in some damage before their combo or their end game kicks in. So filling out the deck comes in, you can do it in many forms, right? You just look at what you're missing from your skeleton, what you need. Sometimes the metagame needs you to put wraths into your deck, right? So board wipes. So a good example would be, a patron warrior. You can't run, a warlock, a Reno warlock deck without, board wipes. Okay, that's not the greatest example because a Reno deck needs to run 30 cards. But just you look at the gaps that you need, and you put in the cards that are most optimal for that lack of whatever you're lacking, in terms of how it comes about fulfilling your plan. Now, this step can take quite a bit, and this step's also linked to the last step. And you'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And sometimes you get super frustrated, you want to start all over again. And that can happen in most deck building games. But if you keep at it, something does come from it. If your original idea was, can be abused enough. Alright, last step, and then, rinse and repeat. Here we go. Alright, final part is testing and tweaking. Now, this part can take a while before the deck becomes, you know, refined cancer. But this is probably the most important part of the whole deck building process. Now, obviously, at the start of a new metagame, you don't need to test and tweak. You can just jump right in with your deck. You know, you can have a blast. But to be competitive when the metagame has stabilized even the tiniest bit, you need to test and you need to tweak according to what you run into and, you know, what you face or what you're looking to face. If you see a card is overperforming, maybe add a second copy. If you see a card is way underperforming, you should give the card more of a chance to show what it's capable of before making a cut. Right? So again, if you started with, you know, the 30 that you think, you know, worked together the best, and you see a card just doesn't do anything in your first 5 matches on casual ladder. So what you do, like, how many times did you draw that card? You know, just look up the stats. Right? There's a lot of stat tracking apps for Hearthstone nowadays, and you just see, like, did you even draw that card? Like, maybe you're linking that to how it's underperformed. Like, if you don't draw a card and if you don't cast a card, the card doesn't really underperform. It's just, you know, it just didn't show up. That's just the RNG of any card game. But yes, testing and tweaking. Now, you can test with friends, you know, in, you know, a gauntlet sort of thing where they make all these different kinds of decks, and you play them one after another, just to flesh out, you know, how your deck does, like what's strong, what's weak, etc. And then you remove cards and you add cards and you remove cards and you add cards, and then you go back to the previous step, which was, you know, metagaming, like, you know. And okay, yeah. Again, this process does take quite a while, and there's no real tips to this process. The only real tip that I can add to this process would be, you need to do this part, right? Sometimes you can be lazy and you can share your deck list onto a site and you can get other people to do the work. But then again, it's just them tweaking and testing the deck, right? And no deck ends up being a juggernaut of the format without some tweaking and some testing. A good example, I really don't want to use Cthulhu Druid right now, but I'm going to use it again. Right? Trump theory crafted a Cthulhu Druid list that got a lot of attention. Right? People took it, people broke it down to its skeleton, people removed some of the random bullshit, and they added their own twist. Now, there's no set, you know, there's no set 30 that everyone net decks right now. Everyone's still testing and tweaking because the metagame is still fresh. But that just shows you how important testing and tweaking can, you know, become. So that's how you build a competitive deck. Now I'm just going to quickly give you an example of how I built my deck that's currently getting quite a bit of attention over on Hearthstone. Alright, here we go. Transition. Screen. We're in the game soon. Now. Yeah, Alright, we're in the game and I'm going to show you how I came up with my Divine Aggro list, which you can find in the info section below. Sell out! Alright. So, I'm following the guide. You know, I know what a competitive deck is, so how did I form my idea? It's Paladin. So, first, when I saw Whispers of the Old Gods, you know, I saw, you know, this. I saw Selfless Hero, and I was like, card's good, demands an answer, 1-drop, right? I also saw Steward of Darkshire. I was like, this can be abused some way. This is like, you know, as other people have rated it, this is like the reverse Hobgoblin, right? Except you don't have to play bad minions with 1 attack, you can play good minions with 1 health. So bam, in the deck. And this was, you know, That was the idea. So the deck had to be based around something to do with Divine Shield, something to do with, you know, either a low curve or more, you know, more controlling deck. In the end, I decided, you know, I wanted it to be a low board control deck. Right, so these two obviously, and you know, I'm looking for Divine Shield things. Right, you know, Rallying Blade sounds amazing. You know, there's a lot of 3 health minions in the meta. Argent Protector sounds amazing. Gives Divine Shield, right? Abusive gives a really cheap buff for your Divine Shield minions, and a 1-drop that has Divine Shields already. What else was there? Now, I thought Steward would abuse multiple bodies. Originally, I put both Bilefin and the Tidehunter in, if I could find it. Yeah, Tidehunter, and then I found it was, you know, pretty average. But then this was my basis of my low curve board control deck. Now, because I'm a Paladin, I have to put in all the Paladin 4-drops. So, Blessing of Kings to Aldermans to Consecrations to and True Silvers. Now, I did end up cutting 1 Consecration, and then I added an Equality because I took a lot of people's advice, and the deck has a lot of 1 health minions. Equality can't push past big taunts or big whatever. So here we have, you know, I'm pretty sure I'm missing some cards, right? Oh yeah, Divine Favor. If it's a low curve deck, it runs Divine Favor, right? And basically, this is the basis of the deck I was gonna work off. This was my skeleton. Now I added some more spicy 1-drops. Wait, I'm pretty sure I'm missing something on 3 as well. Something else. But aside from that point, I'm starting to add things that I'm teching against the metagame, right? And I'm seeing, you know, I'm seeing Face Shaman, I'm seeing mid-range Shaman, I'm seeing the 4-mana fucking 7/7 that everyone's losing their mind about. So bam, 1 Peacekeeper's in, right? Then I see I need to. It's either between Blessing of Might or Seal of Champions. I want to give a minion sort of a power overwhelming effect, but I want to keep my minion. The better one to keep my minion is Seal, even though Blessing of Might does provide a little bit more tempo because it's only 1 mana, right? And I wanted something against the control matchup. I wanted something that ensured I had a body next turn. That would be Stand Against Darkness. Right, now some people you can change this for Justicar or, you know, whatever. And my boy was the Blood Knight. Yeah. Oh yeah, this was in the deck. Yeah. Maybe I should know my deck better. Anyways, Blood Knight was the last card I chose. The reason why, it wins some matchups, you know, out of itself. Druid or like things, you know, it just makes it a lot really awkward and gives you the ability to either tell your opponent to clear your small minions or clear your big minions. This can either save like your whole board. Like the point of this deck is you want something on board at the start of your turn, every single turn in the game. So yes, on Blood Knight, that was the deck. And so, and originally, yes, I had 2 Consecrations. I tested it, I played it over and over. I tested a lot more cards: Cult Masters, Sea Giants, Gore Mugs, Knife Jugglers, everything. Right? And the testing process did last for quite a while, but it was accelerated because I shared the deck and it was public and a lot of people tested it for me. But that is how I built a competitive deck. Now I know my matchups, I know what's good against it, I know what's bad against it. This deck really has, you know, evolved into, you know, another part of when I play Hearthstone. Like, this is kind of my pet deck now. And I'm sure it's not too difficult to do that on your own. Well, not on your own, but like, it's not too difficult to come up with something that you think can be abused, and you think, you know, put with this card, put in the right metagame, tech with these cards, together it can become the next Cancer Paladin, such as this deck. Cancer. Yes. But anyway, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope this video has better audio, and I hope this video does help you build a more competitive deck while, you know, still keeping the fun of, you know, making your own deck and winning with your own deck. Because, you know, a lot of the charm to any card game is being able to build your own deck and being able to have success with it. Right? So again, I wish everybody luck. I hope this guide does help everybody out. If you have any spicy deck lists that you come up with, you know, with the help of this video or whatever, just leave them in the comments of Reddit or wherever, or like YouTube. Yeah, thank you. So comment, subscribe, like. I don't really know, but I just really felt like making another video because, you know, Hearthstone community is pretty cool, pretty awesome. Alright, thank you. I mean, I hope my sound is better than last time. Right? Alright. Alright, latest guys.